Afghanistan's fraying ties with the U.S. hit a new low on Sunday, as President Hamid Karzai said before meeting the new U.S. Defense Secretary that the Taliban killed Afghan civilians in the service of America. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel is visiting Kabul to discuss ways of ending America's longest foreign war. On Saturday, Mr. Hagel's first full day in Afghanistan, Taliban suicide bombers killed at least 18 people outside the Afghan Ministry of Defense in Kabul and in the eastern province of Khost. In a televised speech Sunday, the Afghan president said the U.S. doesn't really see the Taliban as an enemy, doesn't want to leave the country after the coalition's mandate ends at the end of 2014, and is engaged in negotiations with Taliban leaders behind his back. Taliban are every day in talks with America, but in Kabul and Khost they set off bombs to show strength to America, Mr. Karzai said. The bombs that went off in Kabul and Khost yesterday were not a show of power to America, but were in service to America. It was in the service of foreigners not withdrawing from Afghanistan. Mr. Karzai's accusation drew a swift retort from U.S. Marine General Joseph Dunford, who took command of coalition forces last month. "It's categorically false," General Dunford told a small group of reporters soon after reading about Mr. Karzai's comments. "We have no reason to be colluding with the Taliban. We have no reason to be supporting instability in Afghanistan. And all that we have been about over the past 12 years is to bring peace and stability to the Afghan people so they can take advantage of the decade of opportunity that will follow 2014. Despite the tensions, General Dunford defended U.S. Afghan relations, especially between military leaders of the two countries, as dynamic partnerships that can be the shock absorbers through turbulent times. "We do not have a broken relationship," he said. "We do not have a lack of trust. We have a relationship that can actually absorb this tension as we work through difficult issues." Following Mr. Karzai's speech, Mr. Hagel and the Afghan leader cancelled an evening news conference at the presidential palace. U.S. officials said this was because of security concerns that rippled across Kabul in the wake of Saturday's bombings. U.S. bases in the capital were on heightened alert. Mr. Hagel also cancelled scheduled visits to the Ministry of Defense site of Saturday's Kabul bombing and the Interior Ministry. Instead, he met with the two ministers at alternative locations in the city. U.S. officials said they were blindsided by the recent series of actions by Mr. Karzai, but said that the news conference's cancellation wasn't a reaction to Mr. Karzai's critical comments. "We have indicated to him in private that public criticism is unhelpful to the partnership, especially when there is no basis in fact for some of the claims he makes," said one senior U.S. official. "We understand that there are issues, but every close relationship has issues and we need to work through them in a constructive manner." This isn't the first time that Mr. Karzai accused the U.S. of conniving with the Taliban. In 2009, he alleged that the U.S. was secretly flying insurgents into northern Afghanistan in helicopters, as part of a plan to destabilize the country. The U.S., other Western allies and Mr. Karzai's administration are engaged in discussions over what foreign military presence, if any, will remain in Afghanistan after 2014. The U.S. has also been negotiating with the Taliban, but these talks have stalled over several issues, such as a possible swap of Taliban prisoners held in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, for a U.S. soldier in Taliban captivity, and the Taliban's refusal to talk with Mr. Karzai's representatives. U.S. officials have envisaged that North Atlantic Treaty Organization allies would make up a large part of the residual force after 2014. Mr. Karzai, however, on Sunday reiterated his opposition to any deal with NATO as a whole, saying countries willing to keep troops here would need to negotiate individual deals with Kabul. "If you want to stay beyond 2014, all of you separately need to sign agreements with the Afghan people," Mr. Karzai said Sunday. "Limited numbers, in a location we chose and under our conditions and framework, with respect for our laws, our sovereignty, our traditions and culture. Few if any Western allies would agree to contribute troops to an Afghan mission that is not within the NATO framework," Western diplomats say. "They want us out, that is for sure," the Western official said. "They feel that we are part of the problem." Mr. Karzai's outburst came a day after the U.S. abruptly cancelled a planned handover to Afghan control of its main detention facility in Afghanistan, at the Bagram airfield. The handover of Afghan detainees at the facility was a long-standing demand by Mr. Karzai, who portrayed it as a key test of Afghan sovereignty. The event was cancelled, U.S. officials say, because the Afghan government demanded last-minute changes to the handover agreement. The handover should still take place later this week, the Afghan government said. In another flashpoint in relations, Mr. Karzai last month ordered U.S. Special Operations Forces to leave the province of Wardak near Kabul, following the allegations that the Americans or their Afghan allies have killed local civilians, including the local student allegedly found with his throat slit after his detention. The U.S. has denied these allegations and formed a joint commission with Afghan officials to investigate the claims. Mr. Hagel was expected to discuss the Wardak issue during Sunday's meeting with Mr. Karzai. Military officials said they are working on contingency plans if Messrs. Karzai and Hagel aren't able to work out a solution on Sunday to keep Special Operations Forces operating in the province. That is the soft underbelly of Kabul, said a coalition Special Operations Forces official in Afghanistan. It is strategically important that the insurgency doesn't have an 8-lane highway to drive in car bombs. The official dismissed the Afghan allegations of abuse as spurious and said that an investigation had already determined that no U.S. forces were involved in abuse in Wardak. A frustrated Mr. Karzai, however, voiced fresh concerns in Sunday's speech. He said that he had gone to bed as late as midnight because he was busy securing the freedom of an Afghan university student who, he said, had been harassed by U.S.-led coalition forces. Shortly after the speech, Mr. Karzai issued a formal decree banning foreign forces from entering Afghan universities and detaining students. General Dunford said he was unaware of Mr. Karzai's order until informed of the action by the Wall Street Journal at Sunday's briefing with reporters. But he flatly denied the allegations. "I can tell you right now that there are no members of the coalition that are harassing university students," he said.